So, when you hear the name Aristotle, what comes to mind? Probably dusty old books, ancient history, right? But what if I told you he left behind a practical, timeless blueprint for living a good life? Today, we're going to unpack the wisdom of a man so influential, he basically shaped Western thought for 2,000 years.
I mean, get this. Back in the Middle Ages, scholars didn't even have to use his name. If you just said the philosopher, everybody knew exactly who you were talking about. Thomas Aquinas just called him the master. That's the level of authority we're dealing with here. A mind so vast, it became the benchmark for knowledge itself.
And for a little more context, just consider who his most famous student was. A young man named Alexander, who, would become Alexander the Great. Yep, the same philosopher who was pondering the meaning of life was also shaping the mind of the guy who would go on to conquer most of the known world.
But for all his fame, for all his influence, Aristotle was really obsessed with a question that's deeply personal to every single one of us. It wasn't about conquering lands. It was about navigating the challenges of just living. What does it actually mean to flourish as a human being? He had a word for it: eudaimonia.
All right, so first things first, let's quickly meet the man behind all of these incredible ideas. It really helps to understand where his philosophy came from.
So, born way back in 384 BC, Aristotle travels to Athens, which is basically the intellectual capital of the world, to study under the great Plato. He spent 20 years there before deciding to forge his own path, eventually tutoring Alexander, and then founding his own legendary school, the Lyceum. This is where he and his students, known as the Wanderers, would literally discuss philosophy while walking around the grounds.
And this brings us to his first really huge idea. See, for Aristotle, a good life wasn't about chasing fleeting moments of pleasure. No, it was about achieving a lasting sense of fulfillment. And his answer was all about virtue. But his approach, well, it was revolutionary. It's all about finding something he called the golden mean.
He called his formula the golden mean. Now, this is a profoundly simple idea, but it has some pretty radical implications. For Aristotle, any virtue isn't some absolute fixed rule you have to follow. Instead, it's a perfect balance point, a middle ground between two vices, the vice of having too little of a quality and the vice of having way too much.
Let's take the classic example: courage. Someone with too little of it is a coward, right? They're totally paralyzed by fear. But someone with too much is just rash, charging headfirst into danger without a second thought. The virtuous person, the courageous one, finds that golden mean. They feel the fear, they assess the risk, and then they act appropriately. It's the sweet spot.
In this framework, it applies to almost every part of life. Think about conversation. The mean between being a total bore and being a clown is wittiness. Or with anger, the balance between being a doormat and being constantly furious is patience. It's basically a practical guide for developing what we'd now call emotional intelligence.
But here's the crucial part, and you really got to get this. Nobody is born virtuous. Aristotle argued that being a good person is a skill, just like playing the piano. It takes practice. It's all about developing moral habits day by day until finding that balance just becomes second nature. It's not about being perfect. It's about that constant mindful effort.
Now, this idea of finding balance doesn't just apply to our actions, but to our emotions too. And this led Aristotle to a really fascinating question. Why are we so drawn to tragic stories? Why do we binge-watch dramas where everything goes horribly, terribly wrong for the main character?
His answer came down to one single, powerful word: catharsis. He saw it as a kind of emotional cleansing. By watching a tragedy unfold, we get to experience these intense feelings of pity and fear, but in a controlled, safe environment. And in doing that, we don't just feel them, we purify them, and we come to understand them a whole lot better.
He even reverse-engineered the formula for what makes a great tragedy. It starts with peripeteia, that's a sudden reversal of fortune, where the hero just plummets from grace. Then comes agnoresis, that shocking moment of recognition, where they finally grasp the terrible truth of their situation. Together, these moments trigger our pity and fear, and that leads to the final, cleansing catharsis.
And this is why art for Aristotle isn't just entertainment. It's actually a tool for our moral education. Tragedy is this communal experience that recalibrates our compassion. It reminds us that good people can have their lives totally unraveled, and that makes us more empathetic and maybe just a little less judgmental in our own lives.
Okay, so from public art, let's move to our most private relationships.
Aristotle also gave us one of the most enduring analyses of friendship, arguing that it's absolutely essential for a good life. But, and this is key, he was really careful to point out that not all friendships are created equal. He saw three basic kinds. First, you've got friendships of advantage. Think of these as your professional network, right? Relationships based on what you can do for each other. Second, friendships of pleasure. These are your fun friends, the people you share a hobby with or just have a good time with. Both are super common, but they're also kind of fragile. When the utility or the fun stops, so does the friendship.
And then there's the highest form, the true friendship, a friendship of the good. This is a bond based on a mutual admiration for each other's character. You care about this person for who they are, not for what they can do for you. Their sorrows are your sorrows. For Aristotle, cultivating this kind of connection was, and I quote, quite literally the best part of life.
All right, so we've got a guide for virtue, a way to process our emotions, and a framework for building connections. But what good are all these amazing ideas if they can't survive out there in the real world? Aristotle was a total pragmatist. He noticed that in the marketplace of ideas, the best argument doesn't always win.
To solve this problem, he essentially invented the art of rhetoric. And let's be clear, for him, rhetoric was not about manipulation or winning at all costs. No, it was the essential skill of making the truth persuasive. He believed that good people had a duty to learn how to communicate effectively, so their vital ideas wouldn't just get drowned out by all the noise.
And his advice? It is startlingly modern. It's like a playbook for a great TED Talk. To be persuasive, you can't just throw facts at people. You have to understand your audience's fears and emotions. You have to capture their attention, maybe with a little humor. And you have to use vivid examples to make your arguments not just logical, but memorable.
So when you step back and you look at all these pieces together, the golden mean, catharsis, true friendship, rhetoric, a really clear and powerful picture of his whole project starts to emerge.
You see, philosophy for him was never some abstract game for an intellectual elite. It was a practical toolkit. It was a hands-on guide for navigating the profound complexities of our character, our emotions, our relationships, and our society with wisdom and with grace.
Over 2,000 years ago, he laid out this comprehensive blueprint for human flourishing, a guide to finding balance, empathy, connection, and influence. The only question that remains is, in our modern, crazy, fast-paced world, are we taking the time to actually build with it?